In a profession built on the sacred oath to first do no harm, some physicians have betrayed that trust in the most horrific ways imaginable. What drives a doctor, someone who has spent years training to heal, to deliberately harm or even kill their patients? Today we dive into the darkest corners of medical history to uncover the stories of doctors who became predators in white coats. Imagine placing your life in someone's hands, only to discover those hands belong to a calculated killer. The psychological impact of medical betrayal runs deeper than other crimes because it violates our fundamental need to trust healers when we're at our most vulnerable. One study found that patients who experienced medical trauma often never seek healthcare again, even when desperately needed. Before we continue with these chilling cases, if you've ever experienced a breach of trust with a medical professional or have thoughts on this topic, share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help others recognize warning signs they would otherwise miss. And if you're new here, subscribe to join our community of truth seekers who aren't afraid to confront the darkest aspects of human behavior. Healthcare serial killers represent a unique category of predator. Unlike typical murderers who might kill in passion or for clear material gain, medical killers operate within systems of trust, using their specialized knowledge to both commit and conceal their crimes. Criminologists have identified several distinct motivations among healthcare killers. Some suffer from hero syndrome, deliberately creating emergencies they can rescue patients from. Others experience a godlike power rush from determining who lives and dies. A smaller subset are financially motivated, seeing patients as mere sources of revenue rather than human beings deserving care. What makes these cases particularly disturbing is how the medical establishment itself often becomes an unwitting accomplice. Prestigious credentials, professional courtesy, and institutional reputation concerns can create a protective shield around these predators, allowing their behavior to continue far longer than it should. In researching these cases, we've looked beyond the sensational headlines to examine the systemic failures, psychological patterns, and warning signs that were missed. The stories you're about to hear aren't just about individual monsters. They reveal dangerous gaps in the systems we trust with our lives. Most medical killers we'll discuss today took lives through direct action, lethal injections, surgical negligence, or deliberate overdoses. But Dr. Farid Fata represents something perhaps even more insidious. A physician who poisoned healthy people slowly, not out of psychological compulsion, but pure financial greed. In the affluent suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, Dr. Fata built a cancer treatment empire called Michigan Hematology Oncology, which grew to 7 clinics with over 1,700 patients. To those in the community, he appeared to be a dedicated oncologist working tirelessly to fight cancer. The reality was far more sinister. Beginning around 2009, Fata began diagnosing healthy patients with cancer they didn't have. For those who did have cancer, he would often prescribe chemotherapy treatments at frequencies and dosages far beyond medical standards. Some patients received dangerous chemotherapy drugs for years when they should have had months of treatment, or none at all. One patient, Robert Sobire, was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer by Fata. After enduring 25 chemotherapy treatments that made his teeth fall out and his body twitch uncontrollably, Sobire learned the devastating truth. He never had cancer at all. Another patient, Patty Hester, received 55 unnecessary chemotherapy treatments over 2 years. The drugs were so toxic they left her with permanent nerve damage in her feet and hands. Why would a doctor deliberately poison his patients? The answer is as simple as it is horrifying: money. For each chemotherapy session, Fata could bill insurance companies thousands of dollars. He specifically chose treatments with the highest reimbursement rates rather than those most appropriate for patients. Court records would later show he billed Medicare alone for $34 million in fraudulent claims. Fata's scheme might have continued indefinitely if not for the courage of office manager Angela Swantek and practice nurse practitioner Angela Pelotte. Swantek first noticed improper chemotherapy, mixing and administration during a job interview. When she reported her concerns to state authorities, The investigation went nowhere. Years later, Pello noticed alarming patterns in patient treatments and, along with practice manager George Karadse, took their evidence to federal authorities. The FBI raided Fata's offices in August 2013. What they discovered shocked even seasoned investigators. Fata had ordered his staff to falsify patient records, misclassify diagnoses to justify treatments, and administer chemotherapy in the waiting room when treatment chairs were full. He had even instructed staff to slow the drip rate of chemotherapy to bill for longer chair time. In court, prosecutors described Fata's actions as the most serious fraud case in American history. Unlike many medical killers who might claim misguided intentions or mental illness, Fata's motives were transparently mercenary. He used the proceeds to build a $3 million mansion while his patients suffered devastating health consequences from unnecessary treatments. In July 2014, Fata pleaded guilty to 13 counts of healthcare fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to pay and receive kickbacks, and 2 counts of money laundering. He was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. At his sentencing, Judge Paul Borman stated, "This is a huge human tragedy. Dr. Fata did not care for patients. He exploited them as commodities. He overtreated, undertreated, and outright lied to patients about whether they had cancer." The true death toll from Fata's actions remains unknown. While directly linked to at least a dozen deaths, hundreds more suffered permanent damage from unnecessary chemotherapy. Many survivors continue to live with uncertainty, never knowing if they actually needed the treatments that left them with lifelong disabilities. Perhaps most disturbing is how long Fata operated despite red flags. Multiple nurses had resigned, refusing to administer what they considered dangerous treatments. Several hospitals had concerns about his practices, yet the systems designed to protect patients failed repeatedly, allowing his deadly fraud to continue for years. If you're finding this investigation into medical killers informative, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps others discover this important content. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of true crime cases that the mainstream media often overlooks. In the early 1980s, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, faced a disturbing pattern. Infants who had been stable would suddenly experience life-threatening emergencies when a particular nurse was on duty. That nurse was Janine Jones. Jones didn't fit the profile of a typical killer. A divorced mother of 2, she presented herself as deeply religious and exceptionally dedicated to pediatric care. Colleagues noted her eagerness to work with the sickest children and her apparent composure during medical emergencies. What they didn't realize was that Jones wasn't just responding to these emergencies, she was creating them. The pattern first caught the attention of Dr. Suzanne Maloney, who noticed that children would inexplicably crash during Jones's shifts, often requiring emergency resuscitation. When Jones was present, the death rate in the pediatric ICU was 10 times higher than normal. Even more telling, when Jones took vacation time, the unexpected emergencies stopped completely. Jones's weapon of choice was succinylcholine, a powerful muscle relaxant that causes respiratory arrest but metabolizes quickly in the body, making it difficult to detect. She would inject infants with the drug, then heroically discover them in distress and help resuscitate them. This behavior aligns with what psychologists call Munchausen syndrome by proxy, creating illness in others to gain attention and praise for saving them. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Jones case was the hospital's response. Rather than report their suspicions to authorities, administrators at Bexar County Hospital quietly dismissed Jones in 1982. They even provided her with a positive recommendation letter, enabling her to find employment at a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas. Within months, children at the new clinic began experiencing similar unexplained emergencies. The death that finally led to Jones's downfall was that of 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan. Chelsea had come to the clinic for routine vaccinations. Jones volunteered to administer them, but instead of vaccine, she injected the child with succinylcholine. Chelsea stopped breathing in her mother's arms on the drive home from the clinic. Though resuscitated initially, she suffered another unexplained emergency at the hospital where Jones had accompanied her, and died. Chelsea's mother, Petty McClellan, became suspicious when she noticed Jones behaving strangely around her daughter. Her concerns, combined with the pattern of emergencies at the clinic, finally triggered a proper investigation. Authorities exhumed Chelsea's body and found traces of succinylcholine. They also discovered that the clinic's supply of the drug was missing 10 vials. In 1984, Jones was convicted of Chelsea's murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison. However, she was only convicted of a single murder, despite being suspected in the deaths of up to 60 infants. The exact number remains unknown because many potential victims were never exhumed and hospital records were incomplete. The Jones case exposed critical weaknesses in healthcare oversight. There was no system to track suspicious patterns of patient deaths across facilities. Hospitals, fearing liability and reputation damage, handled problems internally rather than alerting authorities. And perhaps most importantly, the code of silence among medical professionals meant that concerns were whispered about but rarely formally reported. In a twist that outraged victims' families, Jones was scheduled for mandatory release in 2018 due to a Texas law aimed at reducing prison overcrowding. However, prosecutors worked to keep her incarcerated by bringing new murder charges based on evidence preserved from the original investigation. In 2020, at age 69, Jones pleaded guilty to the 1981 murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer and was sentenced to life in prison. Today, many hospitals have implemented death review procedures specifically because of the Jones case. Unexpected deaths are now systematically analyzed for patterns, and healthcare workers are better trained to recognize and report suspicious behavior among colleagues. Yet the case remains a sobering reminder of how vulnerable patients, especially children, can be to predators in medical settings. While American healthcare has seen its share of medical killers, perhaps the most prolific doctor-turned-murderer in modern history practiced in the unassuming town of Hyde, England. Dr. Harold Shipman, a respected general practitioner, is confirmed to have killed at least 218 patients over 23 years, though the actual number may be closer to 250. What makes Shipman's case particularly disturbing is how thoroughly he defied the stereotype of a serial killer. There were no obvious red flags in his behavior. He wasn't socially awkward or professionally incompetent. In fact, Shipman was widely regarded as a dedicated family doctor who made frequent house calls to elderly patients and seemed genuinely concerned about their welfare. Shipman's method was simple but effective. During home visits to elderly patients, typically women living alone, he would administer lethal overdoses of diamorphine, medical heroin. He would then falsify their medical records to show a history of poor health that never existed, making their deaths appear natural. Often he would sit with his victims as they died, sometimes even comforting family members who arrived afterward. The doctor might have continued indefinitely if not for his own overconfidence. In 1998, he made a critical mistake with his last victim, 81-year-old Kathleen Grundy. After killing her, Shipman forged a will leaving him her entire estate, worth approximately $386,000. Grundy's daughter, a lawyer, immediately suspected the will was fraudulent and alerted authorities. When investigators exhumed Grundy's body, they found lethal levels of diamorphine. This prompted them to examine the deaths of other Shipman patients, revealing a statistical anomaly. The death rate among his elderly female patients was 10 times higher than those of other local doctors. Further investigation showed Shipman had stockpiled diamorphine by overprescribing it to patients who didn't need it, then recording that they had received higher doses than they actually had. What truly sets the Shipman case apart is the absence of an obvious motive. Unlike Fata, he didn't profit financially from most murders. Unlike Jones, he didn't create emergencies to heroically resolve them. Psychological profiles suggest Shipman may have been driven by a godlike desire for control over life and death, possibly stemming from witnessing his mother's painful death from cancer when he was 17. The investigation revealed another disturbing aspect of Shipman's crimes: how easily medical professionals can manipulate death documentation. As a doctor, Shipman could certify causes of death himself, eliminating the need for coroner involvement. He typically listed causes like old age or natural causes, which rarely triggered further investigation. In January 2000, Shipman was convicted of 15 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. He never admitted his crimes or expressed remorse, maintaining his innocence until his suicide in prison in 2004. The Shipman case led to fundamental reforms in British healthcare. The government implemented new procedures for handling controlled drugs, created a more rigorous death certification process, and established safeguards against single practitioners having unchecked authority. Perhaps most importantly, it shattered the assumption that a doctor's professional standing automatically places them above suspicion. Dame Janet Smith, who led the public inquiry into Shipman's crimes, concluded, "Shipman was able to kill and to kill again because he was a doctor. He betrayed the trust of his patients and the trust of the wider public in the medical profession." The Shipman case has changed forever the way we view healthcare professionals. If you're finding value in this exploration of medical betrayal, please consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit from understanding these warning signs. And if you haven't already, subscribe now to support our ongoing investigations into cases that demand public attention. While most medical killers on our list operated within otherwise legitimate healthcare settings, Dr. Kermit Gosnell represents a case where the line between medical practice and criminal enterprise became completely blurred. His Women's Medical Society clinic in West Philadelphia wasn't just the site of murders. It was a facility that had abandoned medical standards entirely. Gosnell's clinic primarily served low-income minority women seeking late-term abortions. What made his case particularly shocking wasn't just the crimes themselves, but how regulatory agencies repeatedly failed to act despite receiving numerous complaints over decades. The clinic conditions, as later documented by investigators, were horrifying. Untrained staff administered anesthesia while Gosnell was absent. Medical equipment was broken, outdated, or improperly sterilized. Fetal remains were stored in bags, bottles, even refrigerators, alongside staff food. Cat urine and feces were found throughout the facility. One investigator described it as a house of horrors. Gosnell's crimes came to light not through medical oversight, but during a 2010 drug raid. Authorities were investigating reports that the clinic was illegally prescribing painkillers. What they discovered instead led to murder charges. Prosecutors alleged that Gosnell routinely delivered late-term babies alive and then killed them by severing their spinal cords with scissors, a procedure he called snipping. Former employees testified that hundreds of babies had been killed this way. They described infants moving, breathing, and screeching before being killed. One baby was described as being big enough to walk to the bus stop. Staff with no medical training were instructed to administer drugs based on the patient's ability to pay, rather than medical need. Beyond the infant deaths, Gosnell was also charged in the death of 41-year-old Kanamaya Mongar, a refugee who died from an anesthesia overdose administered by an untrained staff member. At least 2 other women had previously died under his care, and countless others suffered perforated uteruses, infections, and permanent injuries. What makes the Gosnell case particularly relevant to our examination of medical killers is how thoroughly the systems designed to prevent such abuses failed. The Pennsylvania Department of Health had not inspected the clinic since 1993, despite numerous complaints. The Department of State, which oversees medical licensing, had similarly received and ignored complaints. Even the National Abortion Federation had evaluated the clinic, denied Gosnell membership due to numerous violations, but never reported their concerns to authorities. In 2013, Gosnell was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of babies born alive, 1 count of involuntary manslaughter in Mongar's death, and hundreds of lesser charges, including performing illegal late-term abortions and violating informed consent laws. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The case sparked intense debate about abortion regulations, but beyond the political controversy lies a more fundamental issue relevant to all medical settings. What happens when oversight systems prioritize institutional convenience over patient safety. For 17 years, no health official conducted even a routine inspection of Gosnell's facility, despite legal requirements to do so. A grand jury report on the case concluded, the Pennsylvania Department of Health abruptly decided, for political reasons, to stop inspecting abortion clinics at all. With the change of administration from Governor Casey to Governor Ridge, officials concluded that inspections would be putting a barrier up to women seeking abortions. The Gosnell case demonstrates how vulnerable populations, in this case, poor minority women, often receive the least protection from medical systems. When patients lack financial resources, education about their rights or alternative care options, they become prime targets for medical exploitation and abuse. I love it when they die. I love to see the look in their eyes when they know it's over. These chilling words, allegedly spoken by Dr. Michael Swango to a colleague, offer a rare glimpse into the mind of a medical killer who operated across continents and evaded capture for nearly 2 decades. Unlike some others on our list whose motives remained ambiguous, Swango's fascination with death was evident from his college days, when he kept a scrapbook of disasters and wrote an essay titled The Enjoyment of Death. Swango's medical career began at Southern Illinois University in the early 1980s, where classmates noted his strange behavior. He was nicknamed 00 Swango, like James Bond's License to Kill, after patients he treated during clinical rotations mysteriously crashed. Despite concerns, he graduated in 1983 and secured an internship at Ohio State University Hospital. At Ohio State, the pattern continued. When Swango was on call, healthy patients would suddenly develop mysterious symptoms: sweating, vomiting, cardiac distress. At least 5 patients died unexpectedly during his rotations. Nurses became so suspicious that they began warning each other. Don't let your patients eat or drink anything if Swango's been around. Hospital administrators investigated, but found no conclusive evidence. Rather than extend his residency, they simply let him complete his year and move on, a decision that would have fatal consequences. This pattern of institutional failure to communicate concerns would allow Swango to continue practicing medicine despite leaving a trail of suspicious deaths. In 1984, while working as an ambulance paramedic in Illinois, Swango was caught putting ant poison in his co-workers' donuts and coffee. He was convicted of aggravated battery and served 2 years in prison. Remarkably, this conviction for poisoning did not permanently bar him from medicine. Upon release, Swango legally changed his name to Daniel Adams and secured medical positions by falsifying his credentials. He worked briefly at the University of South Dakota, then moved to New York, where he joined a residency program at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. When administrators discovered his criminal past, they fired him, but again failed to alert national medical authorities. Facing increasing scrutiny in the United States, Swango moved his practice overseas. He worked at a hospital in Zimbabwe, where nurses nicknamed him Dr. Death, after 5 patients died during his first weekend on call. When suspicious colleagues searched his belongings, they found bottles of poison and syringes. Yet even after being fired, he managed to secure a position at a hospital in Zambia, where more patients died mysteriously. Swango's international killing spree might have continued indefinitely, if not for the persistence of a few individuals. Dr. Jordan Cohen at Stony Brook alerted the FBI after learning Swango had applied for a new position. Simultaneously, journalist James B. Stewart began investigating the case for Vanity Fair, connecting dots that institutions had failed to link. When Swango attempted to return to the U.S. in 1997, he was arrested at the Chicago airport. Initially held on fraud charges for lying on his medical applications, authorities built a stronger case as the investigation expanded. In 2000, facing mounting evidence, Swango pleaded guilty to 3 murders and was sentenced to life without parole. The true death toll of Swango's actions will never be known. Investigators believe he killed between 30 and 60 patients across the United States, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. Many potential victims were cremated or buried before suspicions arose, making confirmation impossible. The Swango case exposed critical flaws in medical credentialing systems. There was no national database to track problem doctors. Hospitals often conducted minimal background checks, and perhaps most disturbingly, many institutions chose to quietly dismiss problematic physicians rather than report them, a practice known as passing the trash. In response to the Swango case and others like it, the Healthcare Quality Improvement Act was strengthened, requiring hospitals to report disciplinary actions to the National Practitioner Data Bank. Many states also implemented criminal background checks for medical licensure, yet gaps remain in international medical oversight, potentially allowing dangerous practitioners to continue working across borders. I am ready to leave the love and kindness and goodness and patience that I mix with everything else that I am and become a cold-blooded killer. This wasn't written by a character in a thriller novel. These are the actual words of neurosurgeon Dr. Christopher Duntsch in an email to his assistant. Unlike other medical killers who operated in relative secrecy, Duntsch's trail of destruction was brazenly public, carried out in operating rooms with witnesses present. Duntsch's case stands apart because it raises a disturbing question. Was he a malicious killer or simply catastrophically incompetent? And if the latter, how could someone so dangerously unskilled be allowed to continue performing high-risk surgeries? Christopher Duntsch arrived in Dallas, Texas in 2010 with impressive credentials, an MD and PhD from a reputable program, completion of a neurosurgery residency, and research publications to his name. He was recruited by Baylor Regional Medical Center at Plano with promises of building a world-class neurosurgery practice. What followed was an 18-month surgical rampage that left 33 patients seriously injured. 2 patients died, and others were left paralyzed or in chronic pain. Fellow surgeons who reviewed his cases described his work as appearing to be performed by someone who had never seen spine surgery before, or worse, by someone deliberately trying to cause harm. In one case, Duntsch operated on his friend Jerry Summers to remove a relatively simple cervical fusion. During the procedure, he severed vertebral arteries, causing massive blood loss. Summers woke up quadriplegic. In another case, he operated on the wrong part of patient Philip Mayfield's spine, leaving him partially paralyzed. Perhaps most shocking was the case of Kelly Martin, who came in for a minor procedure and bled to death when Duntsch severed her vertebral artery and failed to control the bleeding. Just days later, he performed surgery on Mary Afford, severing a nerve root and leaving bone fragments in her soft tissue. When another surgeon had to repair the damage, he was so shocked by what he found that he took pictures, believing no one would otherwise believe the extent of the surgical disaster. What makes the Duntsch case particularly disturbing is how long he was allowed to continue operating despite clear evidence of danger. After the first catastrophic outcomes at Baylor, the hospital did not report him to the National Practitioner Data Bank. Instead, they asked for his resignation and he simply moved to another hospital. This pattern repeated at Dallas Medical Center and Legacy Surgery Center. The Texas Medical Board, despite receiving multiple complaints, took nearly a year to suspend Duntsch's license. During this time, he continued to operate and harm patients. The delay was partly due to the board's requirement for extensive documentation and peer review, processes designed to protect physicians from unfair accusations, but which in this case allowed a dangerous surgeon to continue practicing. Dr. Robert Henderson, who repaired Duntsch's damage to Mary Afford, became so concerned that he took the extraordinary step of contacting the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. This led to an unprecedented criminal case. Duntsch was charged with 5 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of injury to an elderly person. In 2017, Duntsch was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, marking the first time in American history that a doctor was imprisoned for malpractice. The jury took just 4 hours to reach their verdict after hearing testimony from patients left disabled and in chronic pain. Investigations into Duntsch's background revealed troubling signs that had been missed or ignored. During his residency, there were concerns about his surgical skills and reports of cocaine use. His research lab had been shut down after he was found unconscious at work. Yet he continued to advance through the medical system. The Duntsch case led to significant reforms in Texas, including strengthening the Texas Medical Board's ability to quickly suspend dangerous physicians and improving requirements for hospitals to report problematic doctors. It also raised important questions about the culture of medicine itself, particularly the reluctance of doctors to report colleagues and of hospitals to acknowledge problems that might lead to liability. As prosecutor Michelle Shugot stated during the trial, "This was not a mistake. This was not malpractice. This was intentional. This was knowing. This was reckless." As we've examined these cases of medical betrayal, disturbing patterns emerge that transcend individual killers. Understanding these common elements is crucial, not just for historical interest, but for protecting ourselves and our loved ones in healthcare settings today. First, institutional failure appears consistently across these cases. Hospitals, medical boards, and regulatory agencies repeatedly prioritized reputation management and liability concerns over patient safety. When problems arose with Duntsch, Swango, and Jones, their employers often chose to quietly dismiss them rather than report them, allowing them to simply move to new facilities and continue harming patients. Second, we see the dangerous power of credentials and authority. A medical degree created a presumption of competence and ethical behavior that was extraordinarily difficult to overcome, even when faced with overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Patients and even fellow healthcare workers often dismiss their own concerns because the doctor knows best. Third, these cases reveal how vulnerable populations face the greatest risk. Fata targeted cancer patients desperate for treatment. Gosnell's victims were primarily low-income women with limited healthcare options. Shipman preyed on elderly patients living alone. When patients lack resources, education, or advocates, they become easier targets for medical exploitation. Fourth, whistleblowers played a crucial role in stopping these medical killers. In nearly every case we've examined, concerned healthcare workers noticed problems long before official action was taken, yet many faced significant obstacles in getting their concerns addressed, from institutional resistance to fear of professional retaliation. So what can we learn from these cases to better protect ourselves and our loved ones? 1. Trust but verify. While most healthcare providers are dedicated professionals, blind trust can be dangerous. Ask questions about diagnoses and treatments. Seek second opinions for major procedures or when something feels wrong. 2. Watch for red flags. Be wary of providers who resist questions, become defensive when challenged, or dismiss your concerns. Legitimate medical professionals welcome informed patients and shared decision-making. 3. Research your providers. State medical board websites allow you to verify a doctor's license and check for disciplinary actions. Sites like Healthgrades and the National Practitioner Databank can provide additional information about a provider's history. 4. Bring an advocate. When possible, have a trusted friend or family member accompany you to important medical appointments. They can ask questions you might forget and provide another perspective on the interaction. 5. Document everything. Keep detailed records of your symptoms, treatments, and conversations with healthcare providers. This documentation can be crucial if concerns arise later. Modern healthcare has implemented numerous safeguards in response to these cases. Hospital death review committees now look for statistical anomalies. Pharmacy systems flag unusual medication patterns. Background checks for medical personnel have become more thorough, and many facilities have implemented anonymous reporting systems for staff concerns. Yet gaps remain. The culture of medicine still often discourages reporting colleagues. Fragmented healthcare systems make it difficult to track problematic providers across institutions. And economic pressures continue to create environments where oversight may be sacrificed for efficiency. Perhaps the most important lesson from these cases is that safety in healthcare requires vigilance from everyone involved: providers, institutions, regulators, and patients themselves. When we understand the patterns that allowed these medical killers to operate, we become better equipped to prevent similar tragedies in the future. We began this investigation asking what drives healers to become killers. After examining these cases, it's clear there's no single answer. Fata was motivated by greed, Swango by a fascination with death, Jones by a need for attention and control. Others, like Duntsch, present more complex questions about the blurry line between malice and catastrophic incompetence. What unites these cases isn't just the betrayal of medical trust, but how systems designed to protect patients repeatedly failed. Each killer exploited gaps in oversight, leveraged professional courtesy, and took advantage of institutional reluctance to acknowledge problems. These stories matter not just as historical curiosities, but as urgent lessons for today. While reforms have addressed some vulnerabilities, others remain. The power imbalance between healthcare providers and patients continues. The culture of medicine still often prioritizes professional solidarity over transparency, and economic pressures increasingly push healthcare systems toward efficiency at the potential cost of safety. The good news is that awareness itself is protective. Patients who understand these dynamics can advocate more effectively for themselves. Healthcare workers familiar with these cases may be more willing to speak up when they notice concerning patterns. And institutions that study these failures can build more robust safeguards. If there's one overarching lesson from our investigation, it's that safety in healthcare is a shared responsibility. Medical professionals must be willing to question colleagues when necessary. Institutions must prioritize patient safety over reputation management. Regulatory bodies must respond quickly to concerns. And patients must trust their instincts when something feels wrong. As we conclude, I want to thank you for joining me in examining these difficult cases. Understanding the darkest aspects of medical history isn't about fostering paranoia. It's about creating a more transparent and accountable healthcare system for everyone. If you found this investigation valuable, please subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of cases that matter. Share this video with someone who might benefit from these insights, and join the conversation in the comments below. Your experiences and perspectives help build our collective understanding. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and remember that knowledge itself is a form of protection.